Hello and welcome to another episode of Study Sessions. My name is Mr. Boff, and in today's episode we are looking specifically at the character of King Duncan. Now, Duncan, the rightful, legitimate king of Scotland in Macbeth, he might not have the most lines or indeed a huge amount of time on stage, but his presence and his fate are pivotal, really, to our understanding of the play's moral and dramatic framework. In fact, even though he's briefly in the play, he embodies the virtues of good kingship. And bearing in mind that tonight's homework is all about kingship, that's why I thought I'd focus on the character of King Duncan. So Shakespeare, throughout the course of the play, presents Duncan as a venerable and benevolent ruler. He's a king whose authority is sanctioned by divine right. He's the rightful king put there by God himself. What we're going to do in today's episode is examine Duncan's journey chronologically, from the play's opening to Duncan's death. And we're also going to be looking at a moment, indeed, when he's dead, it's kind of post-death, and look at how that characterization of Duncan reinforces some of those central themes of the play, themes of kingship, loyalty, and also the natural order. It's worth noting that in Jacobean times, killing a king is not just murder. We're not just killing an old man, if you will. It's actually a sacrilegious act. It's an act against God's ordained order. An audience at the time, believing as they would have done in the divine right of kings, would have really been receptive to Duncan's portrayal as a virtuous and at times almost saintly king. What it does, though, is by depicting Duncan in that way, it underscores the seriousness, or indeed we might write, the gravity of Macbeth's crime. We get that contrast between legitimate kingship, Duncan's legitimate kingship, and, of course, Macbeth's tyrannical usurpation. On top of that, Duncan's fate, his tragic fate, triggers chaos, and we need to be thinking about why is there that connection between the murder of King Duncan and then chaos in the natural order of things. In Act 1, Scene 2 of Macbeth, we get our first introduction to King Duncan, and what comes through is his behaviour in the aftermath of what is a hard-fought battle, a battle that he himself has not seemingly directly participated in. We find Duncan at a military camp near Forres, and he's waiting or awaiting news of Scotland's victory against rebel forces. A wounded sergeant or captain recounts how Macbeth has heroically defeated the traitor MacDonald and also the King of Norway's army. Duncan's immediate reaction to these reports is hugely instructive. It tells us a great deal about his character. Upon hearing of Macbeth's valour on the battlefield, Duncan exclaims in admiration, "O valiant cousin, worthy gentleman." In this enthusiastic line, Duncan doesn't just praise Macbeth's bravery, but he refers to Macbeth as cousin. And that suggests kinship, or what we might term a deep familial form of trust. Shakespeare uses this address to highlight Duncan's affection and esteem for Macbeth. It's a sign, among many signs, of Duncan's generous gratitude. And that's one of the defining characteristics of his kingship, is his generous gratitude towards others. The phrase worthy gentleman reinforces that sense of graciousness. He's openly honouring those who serve him well. He is a king, from the start, he is a king who rewards loyalty and courage. However, Duncan's conduct in this scene also illustrates his sense of justice and the rightful order of society, as we might term it. Upon learning that the Thane of Cawdor joined the rebellion, that's the previous Thane of Cawdor, remember Macbeth is to be made Thane of Cawdor, Duncan swiftly declares that the traitor must be punished. He says, "No more that Thane of Cawdor shall deceive our bosom interest. Go pronounce his present death," that is, execute him, "and with his former title greet Macbeth." By stripping the traitor of his title and then giving it to Macbeth, Duncan is demonstrating that he repays betrayal with justice and loyalty with honour. His final words in this scene, what he hath lost, that is, the old Thane of Cawdor losing his title, noble Macbeth hath won. It neatly encapsulates this principle of repaying betrayal with justice and loyalty with honour. Now, there's also a hint of dramatic irony. Certainly, looking back on this scene, it becomes very, very clear that Duncan is unknowingly elevating the man who will eventually become his murderer. Regardless, at this moment, Duncan appears as a wise and a fair monarch, creating order out of chaos by honouring the loyal and condemning the disloyal. His trusting nature in embracing Macbeth as a new Thane illustrates, though, both Duncan's goodness, but also, and this is really the flaw of Duncan, his kind of blind spot, and it's one that's going to prove fatal. So we'll come to that blind spot shortly. Now, it's also worth just reiterating at the level of language, bearing in mind our focus on word level analysis, the language Duncan uses. Let's just think about it quickly. We've got valiant, worthy, noble. These are all in reference to Macbeth. They show Duncan's positive outlook, but maybe this is a rather troubling tendency, a tendency to see the best in his subjects. He rejoices in Macbeth's success and even tends to the bleeding captain, saying, "Go get him surgeons," demonstrating Duncan's compassion. Through these little details, Shakespeare is painting Duncan as a ruler who's kind, he's appreciative, and he's benevolent. He is the very model of a good king that is going to stand in marked contrast to Macbeth's later tyranny. The warmth and gratitude Duncan is displaying here sets the stage for the moral conflict to come. We see that Macbeth's contemplated crime, that murder as yet fantastical, will be the betrayal of an exemplary king. In Act 1, Scene 4, King Duncan further reveals his character at his royal palace. It's here that Duncan receives an update on the executed Thane of Cawdor. Duncan remarks on Cawdor's last moments and makes a poignant and very telling observation. He says, "There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. He, the old Thane of Cawdor, was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust." Now, this is a very famous line. It's one you will have looked at many times in lesson. And Duncan is reflecting on the fact that, at least from his perspective, one cannot read someone's true intentions from their appearance. He admits that he completely trusted Cawdor, and Cawdor betrayed that trust. Now, the dramatic irony in Act 1, Scene 4 in this moment is sharp because, just as Duncan speaks these words, Macbeth enters the scene. The audience is keenly aware that Duncan is about to place absolute trust in another man who harbours secret ambitions against him. I think that Shakespeare is using this moment to emphasise Duncan's one real flaw, his over-trusting nature and his inability to detect deceit. That line, "There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face," rings true not just for Cawdor, but as a broader theme in the play. Appearances, we know, can be deceiving, can be deceptive, and Duncan is seemingly a poor judge of character when it comes to the smiling Macbeth. It's a classic example of dramatic irony that heightens the sense of tragedy. Duncan has no idea of the danger he's in, even as he philosophizes about the impossibility of knowing a man's mind by his face. This is perhaps Duncan's most serious and potent limitation. Now, when Macbeth and Banquo arrive, Duncan's gracious personality shines even more. He immediately expresses profound gratitude towards Macbeth in an almost kind of emotionally overwhelmed tone, and we can see that Shakespeare is, in a sense, feminizing Duncan. There are reasons to believe why, to be thinking deeply about why Shakespeare feminizes Duncan, which I think he absolutely does. Duncan addresses Macbeth, "O worthiest cousin, the sin of my ingratitude even now was heavy on me. Only I have left to say, more is thy due than more than all can pay." Now, this is a rather lofty declaration, Duncan's essentially saying he feels guilty for not being able to thank Macbeth enough. About the power dynamics here. Macbeth has done so much that Duncan's ability to reward him can't really sort of keep up or match what Macbeth has done for him. That line, "more is thy due than more than all can pay," conveys that sense that Duncan can never repay Macbeth fully for his service. It's language that's rich in metaphor. Duncan speaks of the swiftest wing of recompense being too slow to catch up to Macbeth's merits, and wishes Macbeth had deserved less so that Duncan's thank yous and rewards could match up to his deeds. This hyperbole isn't just flattery. It illustrates Duncan's genuine humility and what we might call generosity of spirit. He openly acknowledges, maybe this is a problem, a debt of gratitude to his subject. And we've got that familial word, cousin, again. Duncan treats Macbeth like a beloved kinsman. Such warmth, such emotional warmth, highlights the moral goodness of Duncan. He's almost too good, lacking any suspicion. Macbeth, in reply, pledges loyalty. Macbeth says, already lying through his teeth, "The service and loyalty I owe in doing it pays itself." It is a facade, the facade of the devoted subject. All the while, of course, we as the audience know, Macbeth is already contemplating some very dark possibilities. Duncan doesn't just stop at Macbeth, though. He also praises Banquo, calling him noble Banquo and saying Banquo deserves no less reward. Duncan metaphorically says, "I've begun to plant thee and will labour to make thee full of growing." Now, this is a kind of feminizing language of growth and vitality and some of the kind of gardening metaphors that we get. It shows that he sees it as his kingly duty to nurture the greatness of those around him. That gardener imagery of planting and growing is a recurring motif for Duncan's style of kingship. It's a choice of words that depicts Duncan as a cultivator of talent and a cultivator of loyalty, one who wants his subjects to flourish. It's no coincidence that Shakespeare has Duncan using this nature metaphor here. It subtly suggests that under Duncan, the kingdom is healthy, it's natural, it's just like a well-tended garden. Importantly, in this scene, Duncan also ensures what appears to be the stability of the realm by naming his elder son Malcolm as his heir. "We will establish our estate upon our eldest, Malcolm, whom we name hereafter the Prince of Cumberland." Now, he announces this in front of his lords. The intention clearly is to honour Malcolm and solidify the line of succession. But it's a moment that's crucial for two key reasons. One, it reinforces Duncan's image as a prudent and loving father and ruler. He seems to be taking care of the kingdom's future by formally designating the next king. But secondly, it fuels further dramatic tension, because Macbeth now sees Malcolm's promotion to Prince of Cumberland as an obstacle to his own kingship. Indeed, right after Duncan says, "From hence to Inverness and bind us further to you," indicating he's going to be visiting Macbeth's castle, Macbeth, in an aside, speaks of Malcolm as a step on which he must either fall or overleap. The audience thus understands that Duncan's very goodness, his eagerness to reward Macbeth, his trust in inviting himself to Macbeth's home, is ironically placing him in grave peril. It's kind of putting him in Macbeth's crosshairs, so to speak. Duncan, delighted with Macbeth and planning this celebratory visit, can't see the betrayal to come. Shakespeare's crafted this scene so it brims with dramatic irony and tension. Duncan's heartfelt benevolence and statements of trust contrast with the mortal danger that lurks in Macbeth's heart. It's a very poignant depiction of a well-intentioned king whose virtues, but also naivety in a corruptible world, will lead to tragedy. We move now to Act 1, Scene 6, the arrival at Inverness. His next appearance is as he arrives at Macbeth's castle for the night's visit. It's a short scene, again rich in atmosphere and irony. Duncan approaches the castle in a gracious, kind of good spirit, utterly unaware, unlike the audience, that within its walls, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are plotting his murder. His opening line upon seeing Macbeth's stronghold is strikingly positive, almost kind of ludicrously positive. "This castle hath a pleasant seat. The air nimbly and sweetly recommends itself unto our gentle senses." Here, Duncan comments that Macbeth's castle is in a lovely location, the pleasant seat. The air's sweet, the air's gentle. This imagery conveys a sense that Duncan feels safe and welcomed and content. How right he was when he says, at least from his perspective, there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. So maybe one of the things we can say about kingship is actually to be an effective king, it's important to be good, but you also have to have that art. You need to be able to see the mind's construction in the face, and that's maybe one of Duncan's chief limitations. Now, it's almost in this moment as if nature itself is putting Duncan at ease. Of course, to the audience, these words ring with tragic irony. The castle is not a welcoming, kind of peaceful haven. It's going to be the site of a hellish deed. The moment is amplified even further, amplified in terms of irony, when Banquo observes that the castle's swallows, or martlets type of bird, are building their nests in every nook. It's an omen of a tranquil and heavenly spot. The air is delicate, as Banquo remarks. Everything in the scene conspires to make Duncan and us as an audience feel that the Macbeth's home is, on the face of it, a place of warmth and hospitality. Dramatically, this lulls Duncan into a sense of false security right before the dark turn of events. Duncan's conduct upon greeting Lady Macbeth also showcases his courtesy and his kindness. He addresses Lady Macbeth, who comes out to greet him, as our honoured hostess, and apologises that the love he receives can sometimes inconvenience those who serve him. The love that follows us sometime is our trouble, which still we thank as love. So he's saying, we bring trouble to you by visiting, because obviously hosting the king is a great deal of work, but we're grateful nevertheless that you receive us with love. Duncan even tries to lessen the burden on Lady Macbeth, teaching her how to politely say that her efforts are no trouble at all. This elaborate politeness showcases Duncan's graceful and considerate nature. He's thankful for his subjects' hospitality and almost embarrassed by the fuss that's made over him. Lady Macbeth, of course, looking like the innocent flower, plays the perfect hostess, expressing that all their service is nothing compared to the honours Duncan bestows on their house. She's utterly charming and humble to his face, hiding her murderous intent behind flawless courtesy, the ultimate facade. Duncan, of course, is completely taken in, expressing not only satisfaction, but great happiness to be there. So, one of Duncan's final lines in this scene is, in hindsight, particularly heartbreaking. He says, "Where's the Thane of Cawdor? We coursed him at the heels, and had a purpose to be his purveyor, but he rides well, and his great love hath holp him to his home before us. Fair and noble hostess, we are your guests tonight." Duncan notes that Macbeth's, quote, great love, his eagerness, made him rush ahead to prepare, and Duncan is pleased by it. Duncan then formally entrusts himself to Lady Macbeth's care for the evening. Finally, as they prepare to go inside, Duncan says warmly to Lady Macbeth, "Give me your hand, conduct me to mine host. We love him highly, and shall continue our graces towards him." This is Duncan's last line before, eventually, he goes to his doom. In it, he's again professing his deep affection for Macbeth and continues to favour and honour him. The dramatic irony here now is almost painful. Duncan literally takes Lady Macbeth's hand, full of respect, and asks to be led to Macbeth, calling Macbeth his beloved host. The audience knows this innocent king is walking into a trap. There is something of the victim of Duncan here. He is the victim of that knight's treachery, and the people who are going to betray him are leading him literally by the hand. Shakespeare heightens the tragedy by portraying Duncan as gracious, trusting, but also, I think because of those two things, somewhat feminine and weak and vulnerable. This is the moment when he is at his most vulnerable. From a thematic standpoint, Scene 6 contrasts appearance versus reality just masterfully. It's a kind of masterpiece, really, of that. Duncan perceives the castle and its hostess at face value. What a pleasant home! What a loyal lady! Whereas the reality is that both the place and the people are harbouring lethal intentions. It also underscores that theme of hospitality violated. You know, he's here in double trust, as Macbeth will remark of Duncan shortly. Duncan's not just a king, he's also a guest under Macbeth's roof. Within the play, and even today, murdering a guest who's dined at your table is an unspeakable crime, not particularly good hosting. Macbeth himself, in the next scene, will cite being Duncan's host, as a reason he should, quote, shut against his murderer the door, or should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife. So in Act 1, Scene 6, we witness Duncan under Macbeth's roof, completely at peace and, apparently, cared for. It's a setup that makes the impending violation of that sacred host-guest bond even more horrific. Duncan's grace, his serenity, his, in a sense, kind of moral beauty create a sharp contrast to the bloody chaos that's going to soon unfold. For now, though, Duncan is the picture of a kindly ruler enjoying the company of those he trusts. The tragedy is that his trust is utterly misplaced. It's a crucial detail Shakespeare uses to evoke our pity and to cast Macbeth's planned crime as absolutely monstrous. We're going to move now to Act 1, Scene 7 and Macbeth's soliloquy, particularly where he focuses on Duncan's virtues as king. It's a really famous soliloquy scene where Macbeth is wrestling with his conscience and considering whether or not to murder King Duncan. While Duncan himself isn't on stage, of course, he's happily, seemingly in another room dining and enjoying the feast, it's a scene that offers a profound insight into how Duncan is perceived by his would-be killer, and it further cements Duncan's portrayal as an excellent king. Macbeth's soliloquy begins with him acknowledging all the reasons not to kill King Duncan. Macbeth knows that Duncan is at his house in double trust. Notice the word double there. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. It's a line that reminds the audience of Duncan's many claims to Macbeth's loyalty. Duncan is Macbeth's cousin, kinsman, and liege lord, and now also his guest. By Macbeth's own admission, these are powerful moral obligations not to harm Duncan. Macbeth should be protecting Duncan, not plotting against him. This emphasis shows just how deeply wrong and, crucially, unnatural the act of regicide would be, given Duncan's trusting relationship to Macbeth. It also underscores Duncan's goodness. Had Duncan been a tyrant or cruel leader, Macbeth might have rationalized the assassination as justified. But instead, Macbeth can only cite reasons why killing Duncan is indefensible. Crucially, Macbeth then reflects on Duncan's qualities as a king. He admits that Duncan has done nothing to deserve such a fate, articulating Duncan's virtues in soaring poetic language. Besides, I love this, besides this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, against the deep damnation of his taking off. Now let's unpack that, because it's one of the most powerful descriptions of Duncan in the entire play. Macbeth says Duncan has carried his faculties, his royal powers, so meek. That is, Duncan has been operating with humility and gentleness. He's been so clear in his great office. He's been blameless, just, and pure as a king. There's no corruption, there's no evil in Duncan's rule. He's clear, he's transparent, he's pure in his exercise of power. In other words, Duncan is a model king. He's exemplary, he's humble, he's virtuous, he's innocent of any wrongdoing. Because of this, Macbeth imagines that Duncan's very virtues will cry out against his murder. And Shakespeare uses a wonderfully vivid simile here. It's one of my favourite lines of the play. These virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, against the injustice of his assassination. It's wholly angelic imagery which suggests that killing Duncan is a crime of cosmic proportions, kind of cosmic magnitude. Even the angels would protest against it, trumpeting to heaven about the deep damnation incurred by destroying such a good man. And that phrase, deep damnation of his taking off, means the profound damnation, the accursed act of killing him. Macbeth knows full well, fully acknowledges that murdering Duncan would be a heinous, damnable offence precisely because Duncan is so good. He even personifies pity as a newborn baby or a cherub that will ride the winds and spread the news of the horrid deed, causing everyone to shed tears. So in short, Macbeth imagines that the world itself will react with outrage and sorrow if this virtuous king is killed. It's a kind of cosmic magnitude language that reminds us of all great Neptune's oceans after the murder. This internal debate then, through the soliloquy that we can hear it, within Macbeth, serves, interestingly, to extol Duncan's kingship. Even through Macbeth's eyes, Duncan is not a tyrant. He's not a weak ruler that we've maybe got good reason to overthrow. He's meek, he's virtuous, he's almost saint-like. Even Macbeth has no personal grievance with Duncan. He notes Duncan hath honoured me of late, referring to the new title and praise that Duncan's just given him. Macbeth's sole motive, then, is vaulting ambition. It's not any fault of Duncan's. It reinforces the idea that Duncan is an innocent victim, making the crime of regicide an act of pure evil ambition. It heightens our dread and our moral revulsion at the idea of Duncan being murdered. Macbeth's conscience is giving, then, the audience every reason to root for Duncan's survival, or, at the very least, to mourn what is about to happen to such a good man. It's also telling that even Lady Macbeth, who enters to spur Macbeth on, acknowledges Duncan's goodness in a kind of subtle way. Earlier, she has said the following. She said that she couldn't kill Duncan herself because had he not resembled my father as he slept, I would have done it. This remark, even though it's brief, suggests that Duncan, in sleep, appeared vulnerable and kind, like a kind of father figure, momentarily pricking even Lady Macbeth's conscience. Even the hardened Lady Macbeth, at least at this stage, sees in Duncan an image of goodness, By likening him to her father, she's implying respect and affection. So, every perspective in the play, from Banquo to the conflicted Macbeth, even at this stage to the ruthlessly ambitious Lady Macbeth, all of these characters converge and seem to agree on the idea that Duncan is a genuinely good and benevolent king. By the end of Act 1, Scene 7, Macbeth is nearly persuaded not to go through with the murder, precisely because Duncan has been such a great king, and Macbeth, of course, fears the moral and the earthly consequences. Of course, Lady Macbeth involves herself, rekindles his resolve, emasculates him, and so on, and the scene ends with Macbeth grimly declaring that he's going to proceed. But the significance here is that Shakespeare has firmly established Duncan as a benchmark of goodness, a kind of benchmark of kingship. Macbeth's anguished soliloquy serves then a dual dramatic purpose. One, it reveals Macbeth's psyche, but two, it canonizes, sanctifies Duncan's virtues. We're left fully aware that the impending murder is an act against nature, justice, and God. In Act 2, the tragedy that's been brewing finally strikes. Duncan's murdered off stage by Macbeth. Now, although Duncan himself doesn't speak in Act 2, the scenes surrounding his death continue to develop his character's impact and also the thematic significance of his loss. Shakespeare carefully depicts the night of Duncan's murder and its immediate aftermath in a way to show that the regicide is a deeply unnatural, heinous event that upends the moral order. Act 2, Scene 1 finds Duncan retired to bed after an evening of graciously feasting at Macbeth's castle at Inverness. We learn through Banquo, interestingly, that Duncan was in unusually good spirits that night. Banquo mentions, "The king's abed. He hath been in unusual pleasure, and sent forth great largesse to your offices." In less poetic terms, Duncan was delighted by his stay with the Macbeths and generous in rewarding his servants. Remember, he even gives Lady Macbeth a diamond in thanks for her hospitality. It's a little detail which Banquo shares with Macbeth as further proof of Duncan's generosity and kindness. He is the kind of king who, even on the eve of his death, although he doesn't know it, is making others happy and distributing gifts. Macbeth's response right after this is telling. As Banquo leaves, Macbeth hallucinates the famous bloody dagger, leading him to Duncan's chamber. Now, I mentioned earlier about the feminizing of Duncan and the kind of vulnerability, the gentleness of Duncan. All of these traits serve to feminize him. But this becomes particularly, I would say, unsettling when we quote this moment. And this is just after the kind of hallucination of the dagger. It's part of this scene. I just want to read it to you, and I want you to think about what's going on here and why it's so important and interesting. Okay? So Macbeth says there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a dagger that he can see before him. It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes. And then he says, now o'er the one half world, nature seems dead. Okay, that's interesting. So that the planned regicide of Duncan is associated with nature itself being dead. Then Macbeth engages in a very interesting and strange comparison. He says, with Tarquin's ravishing strides towards his design moves like a ghost. Now here, what Macbeth is doing is comparing his approach, him approaching Duncan fast asleep. Macbeth is comparing himself to the figure of Tarquin. Now, Tarquin was a tyrannical king in 6th century Rome. Shakespeare's alluding to a very well-known account describing how this tyrannical king stole through this palace in the middle of the night to forcefully, now ravish, that's rather euphemistic language effectively for rape and sexually assault, a noblewoman called Lucretia. And it's an atrocity that, interestingly, triggered the eventual overthrow of Tarquin. Now, here, what Shakespeare is doing is personifying murder, and we can obviously link that to Macbeth himself as Tarquin sneaking towards his victim. So in this metaphorical comparison, what's going on? Macbeth is in effect comparing himself to a rapist and comparing Duncan to that rape victim, to his rape victim, Lucretia. It's a moment that really feminizes and stresses, I think, the vulnerability and the fragility of Duncan, as well as reinforcing just what an utterly appalling, unnatural crime this regicidal killing truly is. Something to bear in mind, and it's a moment and a set of quotations that many students, I think, probably won't go anywhere near. But we can get our head around it, and we should be talking about it in our essays. Now, his last moment of hesitation, Macbeth's last moment of hesitation, includes a rather poignant thought. He says, hear it not, this ringing of the bell. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. Macbeth, in hearing the bell that Lady Macbeth is ringing, asks Duncan, although he's not actually here, not to hear it. The line implies Macbeth believes Duncan's soul is innocent enough for heaven. It's yet another nod to Duncan's goodness, even this time again coming from the mouth of his murderer. The murder itself occurs off stage. Shakespeare's likely chosen to do this, that is, not to depict the actual murder, to keep Duncan's image unstained by gore and to focus the drama on the psychological torment of Macbeth and the horror of the discovery. Act 2, Scene 2 shows Macbeth immediately racked with guilt and horror at what he's done. When Lady Macbeth meets him, Macbeth's in shock, he's unable to say amen, to a prayer that he's overheard, and he imagines a voice crying that he's murdered sleep. Macbeth's conscience is reacting really violently. He knows he has committed an act that is terribly sacrilegious. He even wishes the knocking at the door could wake Duncan. He says, "Wake Duncan with thy knocking, I would thou couldst." The heartfelt wish reveals Macbeth's instant, immediate regret and underscores how undeserving Duncan was of his fate. If only Duncan could be awakened, this nightmare would end. But of course it's too late. The deed is done. What's done is done. And Duncan's lifeless body lies in his chamber. The full extent of the crime's enormity comes to light in Act 2, Scene 3, the knocking at the gate scene. It's a scene in which Duncan's body is discovered. The tension breaks with Macduff's entrance to rouse the king, and what follows is a powerful outpouring of horror. When Macduff emerges from the king's chambers, he cries out in agony at the sight he's found, "Oh, horror, horror, horror! Tongue nor heart cannot conceive nor name thee." As in, it's kind of beyond language itself. Macbeth then announces the murder in a striking metaphor that elevates Duncan to sacred status. "Most sacrilegious murder hath broke ope the Lord's anointed temple and stole thence the life of the building." It's a line, again thinking about kingship, that deserves close attention. Macduff calls the murder sacrilegious, explicitly framing Duncan's killing as a violation of God's order. He refers to Duncan's body as the Lord's anointed temple. In the ideology of the time, a king is anointed with holy oil. They are God's chosen ruler, hence the Lord's anointed. So by likening Duncan's body to a temple that's been broken into, Macduff suggests that Duncan was a temple of God's spirit on earth, a sacred thing. And now that temple has been desecrated, its life stolen. That imagery of theft emphasizes how terribly sinful the act is. Something precious, something holy has been thieved, it's been taken away. In Macduff's eyes, and within the moral universe of the play, the murder of Duncan is an offence against God himself. Now, this would have resonated strongly with the original audience of the play, who considered regicide as the ultimate act of treason and a crime against the natural order and divine order itself. Remember, nature seems dead. Even Macbeth seems to acknowledge this. It's reflected not only in the human reactions, but actually in the environment of the play. After the murder, it's Lennox that mentions that the night has been unruly. Chimneys have blown down, strange screams have been heard in the air, the earth was feverous and did shake. An old man in Act 2, Scene 4, and Ross discuss all sorts of bizarre, kind of strange. "'Tis unnatural, even like the deed that's done on Tuesday last. A falcon was by a mousing owl hawked at and killed. Duncan's horses turn wild in nature. They eat each other. The daytime darkness, an owl killing a falcon, horses eating one another are vivid signs of nature's chaos and disorder. They underscore how Duncan's death has thrown the world off balance into chaos, as though the natural realm itself is protesting against the killing of a rightful gracious king. These are grim portents or omens that reinforce the idea that Duncan's murder is unnatural, it's catastrophic. The great chain of being, that crucial idea that all of creation is linked in a hierarchy under God, has been broken, destroyed, thrown into chaos by Macbeth's act. Only something and someone profoundly evil could cause horses to become cannibalistic and to turn day into night. Now, in scene 3 of this act, the human characters struggle to cope with the horror. Macbeth puts on an act of righteous fury, maybe there's a bit of genuine remorse in there too, and he kills the grooms in a staged fit of anger, claiming he couldn't restrain himself, seeing them with the bloody daggers. He laments Duncan's death with almost ludicrously hyperbolic eloquence, and we know it's not truthful. Had I but died now before this chance, I had lived a blessed time, for from this instance there's nothing serious in mortality, all is but toys, renown and grace is dead, the wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees is left this vault to brag of. So in these lines, ostensibly, Macbeth says that life has lost all meaning now that Duncan's gone. Honour and grace has died with him. While Macbeth is, of course, we know as an audience, largely posturing here to avoid suspicion, his words, ironically, ring true. Scotland has indeed lost its wine of life, its goodness, with Duncan's death. And what remains under Macbeth's upcoming reign will just be the kind of tyrannical dregs of power. He says, renown and grace is dead. In a sense, Duncan himself embodied renown and grace. Macbeth calls him the fountain of your blood when speaking to Malcolm and Donalbain, meaning that Duncan was the source of their royal lineage. All these expressions underscore how irreplaceable Duncan is as a leader and as a father figure. Malcolm and Donalbain, fearing for their own lives, call their murdered father the Lord's anointed. They decide to flee Scotland to avoid the fate that met the fountain of their blood, Duncan. Okay, there's daggers in men's smiles, Donalbain says. Unfortunately, their flight, effectively running away, casts suspicion on them and allows Macbeth to claim the throne. But that too is a reflection of how deeply the unnatural order has been upset. Those rightful heirs are driven into exile, and the king's murderer ascends the throne. It is a complete inversion of rightful order. In the wake of Duncan's death, the tone darkens hugely. Lennox, in Act 3, Scene 6, calls Macbeth a tyrant. By Act 4, we're hearing how bad things have become under Macbeth's rule. Each new morn, new widows howl, new orphans cry. The contrast between Duncan's reign and Macbeth's tyrannical reign could not be more pronounced. Remember, it all goes all the way back to that light imagery. Stars, from Duncan's perspective, shining on all deservers, okay? Whereas, of course, Macbeth says, stars hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. You know, Duncan is all about life. He's all about vitality. He's all about goodness and purity and light. He's about all those things. Macbeth is the absolute opposite. In Act 4, Scene 3, when Malcolm is testing Macduff by pretending to be a would-be kind of tyrant himself, Macduff nearly loses hope and cries out that Malcolm's parents were models of virtue. Thy royal father, Macduff says, was a most sainted king. The queen that bore thee, oftener upon her knees than on her feet, died every day she lived. It's quite a late reminder in the play, from the mouth of the outraged and loyal Macduff, that Duncan was viewed as a holy, sainted king, and that even Malcolm's mother, whom we don't actually see on stage, she's not around, presumably she's passed away perhaps, was extremely pious. Macduff's reverence for Duncan, the royal father to Malcolm, shows the lasting impression Duncan left on his subjects. He is almost literally canonized in memory as a saint. Canonized being the formal process of making someone a saint for their good deeds in life. It's the legacy of a king who led with righteousness and mercy, and it is precisely this legacy that Macbeth will never achieve. Instead, Macbeth becomes known as the tyrant, the dead butcher, okay? The usurper who stole the throne through blood and regicide, sacrilegious murder. The difference in language is telling. Throughout the play, Duncan is king, he's King Duncan, he is a figure who commands respect. Whereas after a short time, Macbeth is the tyrant, he is, as he's mentioned at the end, a dead butcher. So, as we come to the close of the episode, even though his time on stage is brief, Duncan is significant. He's the embodiment of rightful kingship. He's just, he's kind, he's humble, he is divinely ordained. Duncan, in a sense, then represents the ideal king. He puts the welfare of others above himself, like a gardener nurturing the realm. Under his rule, goodness and order flourish. By contrast, his murder by Macbeth marks the crucible of the tragedy. It's the moment when the political and the social order, embodied by Duncan, is destroyed and thrown into chaos. We witness how the heavens themselves seem to cry out at Duncan's death, how Scotland descends into chaos and misery under the tyrant Macbeth. He is, in a sense, a sacrificial figure whose fate illustrates the play's moral lesson. The murder of a righteous king is an offence against the divine order that cannot go unpunished. At the same time, it's a reminder that Duncan's kind of generosity of spirit, his honesty, his devotion, these are qualities that Macbeth lacks, but they are maybe a bit of a problem. There's a sense in which these can be limitations, that Duncan is too trusting, rather for an old king, rather naive. And maybe the play is suggesting that to be an effective king is to temper one's goodness, one's honesty with that art, the ability to find the mind's construction in the face, to not wholeheartedly, totally and completely place your absolute trust in others. That maybe to be a good king, we need a healthy dose of skepticism. And so on that note, the episode has come to an end. As always, thank you so much for listening. I really hope this has helped flesh out a key character. As I've said, brief though his time in the play actually is, I hope that's helped us think deeply about this character and the way he provides such an important and interesting contrast with the tyranny of the great usurper Macbeth. So thank you so much for listening, and best of luck, not only with tonight's homework, but of course with your actual exam, paper 1, on the 12th of May.